My mom wants me to forgive the man who assaulted me and let him go near me and my child unsupervised. I was assaulted by my husband's best friend Carson when I was 16, but that wasn't even the worst part. You see, my mother never liked my husband Luke, but she absolutely loved Carson. He came from a great family with a stellar reputation here in Riverside, so when Carson had his way with me, my mom never believed me when I told her. To pour salt in the wound, Carson's mom was also my mom's boss at Sterling Insurance Company, and I knew that played a big part in my mom not believing me. But I refused to stay silent. I went to the authorities despite my mom begging me not to. While I was waiting for trial, I moved in with my boyfriend, now husband, and his parents because my mom got so hostile with me at home. That's when things turned bad though. While at Luke's house, I found out I was pregnant. I knew it wasn't Luke's either because we were never intimate, and I was never with anyone like that beforehand. Fast forward 5 months to the end of trial, Carson admitted to the charges and ended up taking a plea deal. He got no jail time. The only caveat was he never had the right to see my daughter. She was born 9 months later, and the day that happened, my mother asked me to move back home and said sorry for everything she did. I knew it was fishy, but she was my mom, so I decided to forgive her. Big mistake. But not at first. The first year was peaceful. My mom apologized profusely, was the perfect grandmother, cooked us dinner, pot roast, mac and cheese, apple pie, the works. But then 1 year later, everything changed. Not because my mother changed, you see. I went to college a few hours away in Springfield, and my mom had retired early to watch my daughter Isabella while I went to college. During the week I stayed on campus and went home on weekends. Well, one day we had a big snowstorm, huge, and my Thursday and Friday classes at Springfield Community College were cancelled. So I went home early without telling my mom, to surprise her. And guess who was in the kitchen when I walked in? Carson's mom, my mom, and Carson. Carson was also holding Isabella, my daughter, when I walked in. They were surprised, to say the least. I started flipping out and grabbed my daughter and packed a bag with her stuff. My mother and Carson's mother were pleading with me not to leave while I was packing. When I went to leave, my mom was crying, now begging me to forgive her. I said I would never forgive her and went to walk out. On my way out, Carson grabbed my arm and said I should be nicer to my mother. My mother called me hundreds of times, but I never answered her. I left to get an apartment with my husband and daughter. I also got a babysitter for when I was in class. A week after this incident, my mother put over $100,000 in my bank account to buy me over or get me to talk to her. I didn't even know where she got that money from. My younger sister Natalie got married years after this happened, and I had to interact with my mom again. I had to be civil with her as she asked about Isabella, who she hadn't seen in 10 years, my son Benjamin, and my current pregnancy. She told me how she wanted to fix things with me and see her grandkids before she eventually dies. She even claimed she always believed me about the assault, she just didn't want to be fired. I asked her if she still hangs out with Carson's mother. She said sometimes, but mostly at Riverside Baptist Church. I left the conversation at that. I was mad because on top of allowing Carson to see my daughter, she hangs out with the woman who went around town telling everyone that I was lying, that Carson hadn't taken advantage of me and we actually slept together, and I felt guilty about it and lied saying he assaulted me. When I got home, I was mad and just needed to cool down. I thought a lot that night about what happened, and the next day I made the decision to call my mom for the first time in 10 years. I wanted to talk to her more and see if we could move forward from what happened and see if I could forgive her. The conversation went well at first. We were talking about current things in our lives. She'd started gardening. I told her about Benjamin's Little League games, Luke's promotion at the engineering firm. But then the conversation turned to church, which led to her talking about Carson. She felt the need to inform me how much my daughter looks like his other kids because apparently I'm supposed to care. I told her I did not want to talk about him, but she continued. She said he's a better person now and feels terrible for what he did, and how I should forgive him because it happened so long ago. You should be over it by now, she said. I got mad. My mother has never heard about what happened from me. She only ever listened to his story about what happened. So I told her what happened, what really happened, and how her talking about the man who assaulted me would make me have zero respect for her. I told her to never call me, to keep our relationship the way it's been for the last 10 years because she is never going to change. I ended with telling her I would never bring any of my kids around her because I couldn't trust her to be around them. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of sweet tea, trying to steady my breathing. Luke looked up from his laptop at the dining table, concern etched across his face. He didn't need to ask what happened, he could see it written all over me. I sat down heavily in the chair across from him, the glass trembling in my grip. The conversation with my mother kept replaying in my mind, especially her words about how I should be over it by now. My stomach turned as I thought about her casual mention of Carson's other children, as if comparing them to Isabella was somehow normal or acceptable. Luke closed his laptop and reached across the table, placing his hand over mine. I pulled away and stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something with the angry energy coursing through me. I started pacing the kitchen, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. The doorbell rang, interrupting my spiral of thoughts. I froze immediately, on edge. We weren't expecting anyone. Luke got up to answer it while I stayed in the kitchen, listening. I heard the door open, then the sound of rustling paper. He came back carrying a small package addressed to Isabella. "There's no return address," he said, turning the box over in his hands. Something cold settled in my stomach as I took the package from him. It was wrapped in pink paper with a bow on top, clearly meant to appeal to a young girl. My fingers tightened around the box as suspicion crept through me. I grabbed a knife from the drawer and carefully cut through the tape. Inside was a silver necklace with a heart pendant, along with a note that simply said, "For Isabella from someone who cares." My hand started shaking again, this time with a different kind of fear. I showed the note to Luke, watching his jaw tighten as he read it. Without a word, I walked to the garbage can and dropped the entire package inside. Luke nodded in agreement. We both knew we couldn't tell Isabella about this, not yet. She was at Riverside Elementary, blissfully unaware that someone was trying to send her gifts. Over the next few days, more packages arrived. A bracelet. A book about family trees. A photo album with blank pages. Each one went straight into the trash without Isabella knowing. I started checking the mail obsessively, intercepting anything suspicious before she could see it. Then one afternoon, Isabella came home from school with an unusual bounce in her step. She dropped her backpack by the door and practically skipped into the kitchen where I was preparing dinner, grilled chicken and mashed potatoes, her favorite. "Mom, I made a new friend online," she announced, pulling out her phone. My knife paused mid-chop. "Oh? Tell me about them," I said, trying to keep my voice casual while alarm bells rang in my head. "His name is Sebastian," Isabella said, scrolling through her messages. "He knows so much about our family. He told me things about Grandma that even you probably don't know." The knife slipped from my hand, clattering onto the cutting board. I turned to face Isabella fully, my heart pounding. "What kind of things?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Isabella shrugged, still looking at her phone. "Just stuff about when she was younger, where she worked, things like that. He says he's doing genealogy research and found our family really interesting." I walked over and gently took the phone from her hands. "Honey, can I see these messages?" Isabella looked confused but handed it over. As I scrolled through the conversation, my blood ran cold. The messages were careful, friendly, but there were details only someone close to our family would know. Details about my mother's old job at Sterling Insurance. About Riverside. About family members I'd never mentioned to Isabella. "Isabella, I need you to block this person right now," I said, handing the phone back to her. "But Mom, why? He's just being friendly." "Please just do it," I insisted, my voice sharper than I intended. Isabella's face fell, but she did as I asked, blocking the account. I pulled her into a hug, trying to calm my racing thoughts. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I just want you to be safe online. You can't trust people you don't know in real life." That evening, after Isabella went to bed, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, sounding surprised to hear from me again so soon. "I thought you said never to call you," she said, a hint of hope in her voice. "Did you give someone Isabella's information?" I demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" "Someone's been sending gifts to Isabella, anonymous packages. And now she's getting messages online from someone who knows way too much about our family. Did you tell someone where we live?" I don't know what you're talking about," my mother stammered, but something in her voice didn't ring true. "Mom, I swear, if you had anything to do with this." "Did Isabella like the gifts?" she asked suddenly, then immediately tried to backtrack. "I mean, if someone sent her gifts, did she see them?" My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles went white. "You knew about the gifts?" I said, my voice deadly quiet. "You knew and you didn't think to warn me?" "I just thought maybe if she got to know him a little through nice gestures." I hung up before she could finish. My whole body was shaking with rage. I immediately went to our computer and started changing all of our online passwords, privacy settings, everything I could think of. Luke helped, both of us working in tense silence. The next few weeks were a nightmare of vigilance. I drove Isabella to and from school every day, no more walking with friends. I attended every school event, scanning the crowds for any sign of Carson. Then I saw him. It was at Isabella's spring concert at Riverside Elementary. He was standing at the back of the auditorium, partially hidden behind a pillar, but I recognized him instantly. The same build, the same way of standing with his hands in his pockets. My blood turned to ice as I watched him watching the stage where Isabella would soon perform. I whispered to Luke, who immediately got up and walked toward the back. But by the time he reached the pillar, Carson was gone. We stayed for Isabella's performance, but I couldn't focus on her beautiful singing. My eyes kept scanning the exits, the shadows, anywhere he might be hiding. This pattern continued for weeks. Carson would appear at the edges of Isabella's activities, soccer games at Riverside Park, school plays, even outside Miller's grocery when we were shopping. Always just visible enough for me to see. Him, never close enough to violate any legal boundaries. He was playing a sick game, and I was losing my mind. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I left Isabella with Luke one evening and drove to Carson's house. I'd found his address through public records, my hand shaking as I typed his name into the search bar. The house was modest, well-kept, with children's toys scattered on the front lawn. The sight of those toys made my stomach turn. I rang the doorbell and waited. When Carson opened the door, his face showed no surprise. He'd been expecting me. "Leave my family alone," I said without preamble. "Stop sending gifts. Stop showing up at Isabella's school. Stop trying to contact her online." Carson leaned against the door frame, a small smile playing at his lips. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said calmly. "I'm just a concerned father who wants to know his daughter." "She's not your daughter," I spat. "You gave up any right to her the day you admitted what you did to me." His smile faded slightly. "Legal rights can be challenged," he said quietly. "Especially when the mother is clearly unstable. Cutting off family members, paranoid about innocent gifts." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. "I'm just saying," Carson continued, his voice maddeningly calm, "that courts tend to favor reformed individuals who've paid their debt to society. Especially when they can prove the other parent is alienating the child from their biological family." I turned and walked away before I did something I'd regret, but his words echoed in my mind all the way home. That night, I started documenting everything. Every sighting, every gift, every attempt at contact. I took screenshots of the online messages, photographed the packages before throwing them away, created a detailed timeline of his stalking behavior. Luke suggested we go to the police, but I knew we needed more than just my word against his. So we installed security cameras around our house, dash cams in our cars, and I started carrying a voice recorder in my purse. If Carson wanted to play legal games, I'd be ready. The situation escalated when Isabella came home from school one day in tears. Some kids had been saying mean things about me, calling me a liar and saying I'd ruined a good man's life. The rumors were spreading through Riverside Elementary like wildfire, and I knew exactly who was behind them. I called an emergency meeting with Isabella's principal and teachers. Sitting in that conference room, I laid out the situation as calmly as I could, explaining the history without going into traumatic details. Principal Catherine listened with growing concern. "We've actually had a man asking questions about Isabella," her teacher Mrs. Wilson said slowly. "He claimed to be a family friend doing a surprise for her birthday. We didn't give him any information, of course, but it was unsettling." I provided them with Carson's photo and a copy of the restraining order I'd started the process for. They promised to increase security and notify me immediately if he appeared again. But I knew I needed to do more. That weekend, I organized a community gathering at Riverside Park. I'd lived in this neighborhood for 5 years, built relationships with our neighbors, been active in the community. These people knew me, trusted me. It was time to control the narrative before Carson's poison spread further. Standing in front of the gathered crowd, neighbors, Isabella's friends' parents, local business owners from downtown Riverside, I took a deep breath and began to speak. I didn't go into graphic details, but I explained that someone from my past who had hurt me was now trying to insert himself into my daughter's life. I asked for their support in keeping our children safe and being vigilant about strangers asking questions. The response was overwhelming. Parents shared their own stories of protecting their children, offered to help with school pickup, promised to keep an eye out. Mrs. Collins from down the street, whose daughter was Isabella's best friend, pulled me aside afterward. "We've got your back," she said firmly. "Anyone tries to spread lies about you in this neighborhood, they'll have to go through all of us first." But Carson wasn't done. 2 weeks later, I was served with legal papers. My mother and Carson had filed a petition with Child Protective Services, claiming I was neglecting Isabella's emotional needs by denying her access to her biological family. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Luke immediately called our lawyer while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the papers in disbelief. My own mother had conspired with my attacker to try to take my daughter away from me. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she'd done before. The next few months were a blur of legal preparations, gathering evidence, and trying to maintain normalcy for Isabella and Benjamin. We didn't tell Isabella about the legal battle, but she sensed something was wrong. She'd become quieter, more anxious, clinging to me in a way she hadn't since she was little. The court date arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. I dressed carefully, choosing a conservative navy suit that made me look responsible, stable. Luke held my hand as we walked into the courthouse, our lawyer Jonathan carrying boxes of evidence. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Carson sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, my mother beside him. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Carson, however, stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The judge entered, and we all stood. My legs felt unsteady as I watched her take her seat, knowing she held my family's future in her hands. The proceedings began with Carson's lawyer presenting their case, painting me as an unstable mother who'd cut off family ties and denied Isabella her heritage. I gripped the edge of the table as they presented their evidence. Photos of me at the community gathering, which they twisted into proof of my paranoid behavior. They had recordings of my mother crying about being denied access to her grandchildren. They even had character witnesses from Carson's church, people who testified about his transformation and dedication to his family. When it was our turn, Jonathan methodically laid out our evidence. The timeline of stalking incidents. The anonymous packages. Screenshots of the online messages to Isabella. Security camera footage showing Carson lurking near our home on Maple Street. Each piece built our case, but I could see the judge's expression remained neutral, giving nothing away. Then came the testimony phase. My mother took the stand first, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue as she described how I'd torn our family apart and prevented her from having a relationship with Isabella. She claimed she'd only allowed Carson to see Isabella that one time because she believed in forgiveness and second chances. During cross-examination, Jonathan pressed her about the anonymous gifts. She denied knowledge at first, but when he presented phone records showing calls between her and Carson's number immediately before each package arrived, she faltered. The judge's eyebrow raised slightly, the first crack in her poker face. Carson testified next, presenting himself as a reformed man who'd made mistakes in his youth, but had since dedicated his life to being a good father and community member. He spoke about his other children, his stable marriage, his volunteer work at Riverside Baptist. He claimed he only wanted to know Isabella existed and was well cared for. When Jonathan questioned him about appearing at Isabella's school events, Carson had an answer for everything. He was just passing by. He had legitimate business in the area. He'd never approached Isabella directly, so where was the harm? His calm demeanor made my skin crawl. Then something unexpected happened. The judge called for a brief recess, and when we returned, she announced that Isabella had requested to speak with her privately in chambers. My heart stopped. We hadn't prepared Isabella for this possibility. She didn't even know the full extent of what was happening. The wait was excruciating. 20 minutes felt like hours. When the judge returned, her expression had changed. She called the court back to order and announced that based on Isabella's testimony and the evidence presented, she was not only denying the petition but issuing a permanent restraining order against Carson. Relief flooded through me, but Carson's face had turned dark. As we left the courthouse, he brushed past me and whispered, "This isn't over." My mother hurried after him without looking at me, their alliance now fully exposed. The next few weeks were deceptively quiet. Isabella seemed lighter, though we still hadn't told her the full details of the court case. She only knew that some people had been bothering our family and the judge had made them stop. We tried to return to normal life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. Then the harassment escalated in new ways. Luke's brake lines were mysteriously damaged, caught by our mechanic during routine service before anything happened. Isabella's school received an anonymous tip about substances in her locker, resulting in a humiliating search that found nothing. Our credit cards were repeatedly compromised. Someone called child services with false reports of neglect. Each incident alone could be explained away, but the pattern was clear. Carson was trying to destabilize our lives without technically violating the restraining order. But we'd learned to fight back. We documented everything, built our support network stronger, and refused to be intimidated. The community that stood by us had grown stronger through the ordeal. Mrs. Collins's marriage survived the attack on her reputation. Parents became more vigilant about school security. What Carson meant to destroy had only bonded us closer together. 6 months later, Carson was finally arrested trying to cross into Mexico. The fake counselor he'd planted at Isabella's school was caught, and the entire conspiracy unraveled. My mother passed away before the trial, but not before helping authorities locate Carson. Today, we're healing. We're free. We survived. And that's the story I choose to tell.